Hi, welcome to One Eye Page. I'm Scott. It's time for the weekly reading wrap up for the week of the 12th through the 18th of February. Let's get going. This was, for me, a very slow week. I finished two books. One of them was an audiobook, which pretty much took me all through the week. As I've described before, I often listen to audiobooks while I'm driving to drop my kid off at school, pick them up, etc. Listen sometimes throughout the day whenever I'm doing something. And I finish one ebook. So the audiobook that I finished was The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. Uh, I did not know what audiobook I wanted to read next. So what I did was I basically searched for best audiobooks of 2023, etc. And this was one of the ones that came up. I will say that the narrator, don't recall his name, was pretty good. I had a lot of hopes for the book. I think at the beginning of the book, I had like, oh, this could be a 5 star. And it's just as time went on, it just went down and down. There are so many characters, and I don't mind a huge cast of characters. I don't mind a huge cast of characters if they're used well, if they are represented throughout the novel. Not all represented very well. There's one major character who just sort of disappears in the last part of the novel, not for any reason. Nothing happens to this character that they didn't die or whatever. They just, their part of the story was done, I guess. It feels like this was a book that was published without editing, not for like writing mistakes, spelling, grammar, whatever, but for logic and story flow. There are a Jewish couple in this novel. I'm not going to pronounce Moshe, I believe, in Chona. He runs a theater which plays Jewish bands and also uh, Negro bands. This is a community where there's a lot of Jews and there's a lot of black people, and of course there's white people who aren't particularly happy about either one of the other ones being there. And she runs her, well, it's their grocery store, but it used to be run by her father, and basically runs it at a deficit because she's always helping those in her community. Uh, the black community here is very fond of her. And at one point in the novel, the two of them take in a young, deaf and dumb black boy because Nate, who works with Musha, is Dodo's, the young boy's uncle. And the state is trying to take Dodo in to put him in, they say a school, but it's more like a mental hospital. And it's never really explained to me very well, at least, why exactly the state is so adamant about this. I will point out, I didn't mention, the majority of the story takes place in 1936. I just, from everything that I know about the time frame, which I was not alive then, but I don't believe that the government was necessarily that pushy about institutionalizing people, especially institutionalizing black people. That just wasn't explained very well at all. And there's just too many characters that there's not really a main character. There are several points where you think, oh, there is a main character, but it's an ensemble piece, but it feels like it should have a main character. I'm going to tell you, okay, you need to go away, Ron. I'm going to tell you something that dropped the book at least a half star for me is at one point when a very important character in the novel dies and the author takes that time when this character that is very important to many other characters in the novel, it's a very sad thing, he takes the time to make a little rant about cell phones. I point out again, the majority of this novel took place in 1936. He's talking about future generations in this little section of the novel for no reason other than he thinks cell phones are bad, which, I mean, if you want to write a book about that, fine, but it doesn't make any sense in here. There are sections in the book, mainly near the beginning and the end, in 1972. They didn't really have cell phones then either. So this just going to cell phones at this very emotional, impactful moment just didn't make a lot of sense for me. There is a lot that is good about this book, which honestly makes me more annoyed about that which isn't. As I said, I was reading it in the first part of the book and I was really enjoying it. I was going, oh, I'm going to have another 5 star here. And I'm giving it a 3 star. The book wasn't bad, but man, was it disappointing. The other book I read this week was Jill the Reckless by P.G. Woodhouse. As I mentioned before, I am trying to read all the Woodhouse books that I haven't read yet to work on my 5-year battle for P.G. Woodhouse. And this one is one that I needed to read for the next one, the next video that I am doing. So I'm glad that I was able to finish it. It's about a young woman named Jill. She is at the beginning of the novel engaged to Derek, who is a minister in government in England. She, at the time, is rich. She's also, as you can tell by the name of the book, not necessarily reckless, but she will speak up about things, which for a young woman in early 20th century England, not really seen as something that's typically done. So she she defends a parrot from somebody and basically whacks this person on the side of the head, and she gets arrested for it. And Derek, whose mother disapproves of Jill already, takes this as a reason to call off the engagement. At the same time, her uncle, blanking on his name, I think it's Uncle Charlie. I'm blanking on his name for some reason. He basically speculates with her money because it's her inheritance, but he's her trustee over it, and he basically loses everything for her. And so, both being heartbroken and poor, the two of them go to America, where a man that she knew when she was young, Wally, he had just met her while she was still engaged to Derek, and there were sparks between them, but of course she's engaged, so nothing went happen, and he was disappointed but didn't say anything to her. And they run into each other in America. And also there's a character, Freddie, who is friends with Derek, and Derek is living at Freddie's place, which I'm not exactly sure why, or Freddie's kind of a pushover. And so there's a lot of romance. Jill is in love with Derek. Wally's in love with Jill. A chorus girl, Nettie, is in love with Freddie. Uh, Freddie would probably be in love with her if he knew that she was in love with him. He just assumes that a woman like her wouldn't care for someone like him. So you got all that. And then there's the world of musical theater, which Woodhouse knows a lot about. He worked on lots of musical theater in the 20s and 30s, even the 1910s, I believe. I don't know if earlier or not. But also, he knows a lot about it. I think he's a little jaded about it. I have experience with a lot of stuff that he's written that's included musical theater in it. It tends to be more hard edged than some of his other writing. And I think there's some bitterness there that kind of comes out in these books. I think it comes out here also. Uh, Also, I don't know if Woodhouse had something against men named Freddie, but man, Freddie's in his novels tend to get uh, have to take crap from so many different people, and generally, Freddie's in his books aren't particularly smart men, but they're not bad men. They care for their friends and they try to do stuff for those they care about. They just, you know, they do blather on quite a bit, but it's like, chill out, people. I I think for a Woodhouse book, it was pretty long, perhaps too much so. I don't know. I had a lot of problems with the uncle character because he's one of those Woodhouse characters who's basically a snake oil salesman and a Eucridge type user, and people are just kind of like, oh, him, and I'm like, no, he's a dick. Um, and I had a lot of trouble getting over that. So I'm also going to give that one a 3 star. So that's it for the books that I have finished this week. I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the books that I am continuing to read. I will mention. I will also mention that I'm reading Uncle John's Reader, a book which you usually have in the bathroom read when you have a moment. So I don't have that one with me here. It's a little bit over 400 pages long, and I believe I'm on page 60 or so. So it's going to be one of those books that I will read through the year. I have started. Well, I have read this book pretty much all this year so far. It is Doonesbury, the 40-year perspective. It's about 700 pages, and I'm on page 141. I except except for a few days when I've forgotten to read it, I try to read about 4 pages a day. So I'm doing all right there. We're still in the 1970s in the book. I have read a lot of these comics before. I think I probably have read all the Doonesbury comic strips from when it started in like 1970 or so until maybe late 90s, early 2000s. I don't have a lot of experience with anything he's published after, and I know that he doesn't do daily comic strips anymore either. So I have read this before. I know a lot of the characters, but this is just a, a huge collection of it. I'm also reading The Complete Peanuts. This is volume 2, 1953 to 1954. Uh, I mentioned in my weekly reading wrap up for the first volume that's a lot of things in that book that aren't the Peanuts that I was used to. Charlie Brown smiles. Not everybody hates Charlie Brown. Some of the main characters are Violet and Shermie, who don't really play a lot of roles in later comic strips. They're around, but they're not big characters. Linus is at the point I'm at. He's still a toddler. Schroeder is older now, but he was also a toddler in here. Snoopy is in here, but he didn't play the same type of role as he does later. So it's like a little bit over 300 pages, and I'm on page 58. I am reading Finnegans Wake by James Joyce. I have two supplemental books that I don't have in the room with me to help me with it. I am at the start of page 13 right now. It is the 18th right now. I started reading on this on the 1st of January, so I do mean to finish it by the end of the year, but I need to make up a lot of room in it. This is about 600 pages. I am also reading Nigel Slater's The Christmas Chronicles. I am on page 120, and it's like 460 pages long. It's a Christmas book. If you know me, you know I love Christmas. As far as Christmas books go, this isn't the best. It's a beautiful book. It's got some recipes in there. I don't know how particularly interested I am in them, but it's something I try to read every day or so. I am reading Charlotte Perkins Gilman, The Yellow Wallpaper, Herland, and Selected Writings. Thanks, Wash. You're making this hard. The first part of this is Herland, the novel that he wrote about a land of all women. I'm 76 pages into that, and it's like 144 pages. I've read all the poems at the back of the book already, and I've read the last two short stories in the book. So I still have half of the novel and a lot of short stories to go through. I'm reading The Underground Railroad by Colson and Whitehead. Okay, you need to move along, buddy. Thank you. I'm on page 98. Again, I've been reading this since the 1st of January. It's like 320 pages long. It's interesting. I have to be honest. It's not as compelling to me as the Nickel Boys that he wrote was. Now, I know there's some magical realism in here that we're just starting to encounter in it yet, but I haven't really. I like the book. I don't love the book, but I still have more than 2/3 of the book to go through. I'm hoping that I will. I have Woodhouse on Woodhouse. This one is 3 nonfiction collections in here. The one that I'm reading right now is Bring on the Girls, which is about his musical theater career that he also wrote with Guy Bolton. I I am on page 34, and it's like 234 pages, so I have 200 pages left. Reading Richard Osman's The Thursday Murder Club. I'm on page 156, and it's like 360 pages or so. I have to say, these chapters are so short that they're actually starting to annoy me a little bit. I don't really feel like I get to know the characters. I don't think the characters are as big a part of the novel as I would like in my mysteries. It's amusing, but it's not captivating. At least not yet. We'll see. Do not move along. Go along. Move. 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 I'm also reading Kristin Hannah, The Great Alone. Quite honestly, I need to be reading this more because I have a book club in a few weeks on it. I'm on page 28 and it's like 550 pages. I'm not really far enough into it to really form any type of opinion. The writing's fine. It's I will say a lot of books in our book club I have become irritated at very quickly in the book, and I haven't been irritated yet, which is not perhaps a ringing endorsement, but for the book club, it kind of is. I also have the big book of Christmas mysteries that I occasionally listen to on audiobook, but I'll be honest, I haven't listened to anything from that for like 3 weeks. I have I Am a Cat. It's written by a Japanese author. I will not try to pronounce the name since I don't have it in front of me right now and I don't want to mess it up. It's just something I read off and on. I think it's like 600 pages or so, and I'm 50 pages in. Notes on Execution, which I also don't have the author's name with me. All right, hold on. Notes on Execution, which was written by Danya Kukafka. It's about a person who's on death row. He's about to be executed, and basically the novel goes back into his life and talks about women in his life. Right now, I'm learning about his mother, like I believe from like 1972 or somewhere around there, I think. So about her life and what she's doing. Her husband's not great. I think she's about to try to get away from him. Don't fully know yet. And I Am a Cat is Soseki Natsume. I know there's pronunciation with vowels in Japanese, so I don't know if it's Natsume or Natsume. So it's an I Am a Cat is about a cat and his life. Those are all the books that I am reading or not reading right now. I have not started yet, but my next audiobook is going to be Shadowland by Peter Straub. It is a book that I have read before. I'm having a hard time picking audiobooks to listen to. So although I have read this book before, it's been a while since I've read it. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that next, and we'll see what else. And last thing I will cover is I've mentioned before, trying to read all of P.G. Woodhouse. So there are many books that I have not read yet because they're more difficult to get. Most of the ones that I haven't read yet, they don't have an audiobook. They're not on Kindle, and they're a little bit difficult to find in physical form. But I have found them. Uh, the Luckstone, which he originally published under a pseudonym, is an adventure story. I don't know how I feel about that. Perhaps Woodhouse can do adventure stories. I don't know. Company for Henry is, I believe, a book from the 1950s or so, where people are trying to pair people up. There's romance in it. It's not one of Woodhouse's most well-known books. Again, a little bit hard to find. I don't know what that says about the quality of the book. French Leave, which is one of the few books I believe that Woodhouse has written that's not based in England or America. This is based in France. If you're not aware, Woodhouse spent a lot of time in France during the 1940s and so, for reasons that if you care to know about, I will probably be explaining in my P.G. Woodhouse 5-year battle for the years, I believe 1942 through 1946, which I have not filmed yet. That's some months down the road, I think. You can also Google it, but let yourself be surprised when I bring it up later. Sunset at Blandings. This is a Blandings Castle novel. Reason that it's not found that much is because it's not a finished novel. It goes to like page 108 or something, and then after that it's notes and stuff. So not necessarily something that I would generally read, but for my 5-year battle, I need to. And Bachelors Anonymous, which is a very short book that came with a card that somebody wrote that they used as a bookmark, apparently. And this was written, I believe, in the early 70s. And, it's about a group, Bachelors Anonymous, people who decide that they're going to stay bachelors. So that is what I have finished, what I am reading, and what I plan to read. I will say, Woodhouse, I have got access to every book now, except one, which I mentioned in a video previously. It is the Globe by the Way book. It's available, it's just too expensive, and it's a nonfiction book and it's very short. I just had to weigh, the pros and cons, and I don't think it's worth it. So that is the only book that I am not going to be able to include in my 5-year battle. So thank you. Please like and subscribe, leave a comment, and I will talk to you next time.